How can we make the world better? By making ourselves better. The Dr. Joe Show explores how you can make positive personal change by using his groundbreaking and highly effective I Am approach to understand who we are and why we do what we do. Your small changes can have big effects.
Join us now for the Dr. Joe Show with your host, Dr. Joe Schrand.
And welcome, folks, back to the Dr. Joe Show. It's so good to be with you guys again every week. And we talk about this with frequency, that even though the world is in a place where there's so much stress and anger, let's step back and look again at who we are and why we do what we do. Right? Remember, anger is an emotion designed to change things. We get angry when we want somebody to do something different, start doing something or stop doing something. But when is the last time you got angry at someone treating you with respect? Never. And that's the power of respect. Right? Respect leads to value, and value leads to trust. And we have a world where there is so much mistrust that we have a real challenge ahead of us. And some of this challenge for some people is, our politics, our choice of which party, our geographic location in the world, our socioeconomic location. But some of this goes back even further. Some of this goes back to what happened when we were children. And we know that the stress response can last a lifetime, and children under stress are at enormous risk of long-term medical conditions if they cannot find someone to value them again. And that's part of what you can do. For anybody who's under stress, remember, you have an opportunity to relieve their stress simply by treating them with respect. Now, tonight we have a remarkable guest and has written this book. Our guest is a former school principal, a speech pathologist, early brain development trainer, parent educator, and child advocate. She's written a memoir and wants to help people understand the effects of adverse childhood experiences, ACEs, and unresolved trauma on one's long-term physical and mental health. Our guest is a mother, a grandmother, a potter, and an occasional jewelry artist who lives in Wisconsin with her husband, John, her beautiful dogs, Bella and Ruby. Just so people know, and this is a remarkable coincidence that I haven't spoken to Julianna about, but my dog is Bella. Our guest holds a bachelor's degree in communicative disorders with a minor in psychology and 2 master's degrees, one in speech pathology and the other in educational administration. Having worked in both fields with a focus on early childhood education, she was at the forefront of the 4-year-old kindergarten movement in Wisconsin. Under her leadership, the 4-year-old kindergarten program in Wausau, Wisconsin, became a statewide demonstration site for collaborative pre-kindergarten programming and the pyramid model for social emotional competence. And I'm sure we'll be talking about that. Her pre-kindergarten programs received the Community's CAN Award from Georgetown University for community-wide collaboration, and were also recognized in Governor Doyle's State of the State Address on January 21st, 2006. Our guest has presented and consulted throughout Wisconsin and the United States on early childhood issues, including parenting, early brain development, and quality early education programming, and has appeared at the National School Boards Convention in 2006 and at the Next Steps Early Childhood Conference at Disney World in Florida in 2003. In 2007, our guest was sidelined with a necrotizing, which is a flesh-eating infection, and again in 2010 with cancer, during which she was also caring for her abusive father. Her physical and mental health issues came to a head in 2011 when her life's work was threatened. She is now reclaiming her mission to improve children's lives with her book, Life with Less of Me. Let me introduce our guest tonight, Julianna Burmesch. Julianna, it is a pleasure to have you here on the Dr. Joe Show. And thank you for so much advocacy for kids in need. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you. And thank you for allowing me to join you in promoting my message that it's important, that childhood experiences are important and can follow us for the rest of our life.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So, where do you want to start with this? I mean, I've had a chance to read the book, Life with Less of Me. Folks, it's definitely worth reading. Um, but I warn the reader, it's powerful. And it travels through a journey that unfortunately so many folks have been on. Juliana, how did you get inspired to write it other than, I mean, why now? Why now? You've been managing ACEs for a long time. Why now?
After I retired, not by choice, um, because of mental health issues, and I was somewhat pushed out because of political reasons in the school district.
And that was when you were a principal as well,
Right,
right?
that was when I was a
It's
principal, a
crazy.
successful principal.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was devastated, um, and re-traumatized because of what happened when I was caring for my father. And it took me 5 years to actually recover enough for me to think about whether or not I was going to tell my story. And I was at a book club and I read the story Educated, and we talked about it. And on the way home, I thought, people might want to hear my story
Yeah.
and know that um, perhaps they shouldn't wait until they're 60 years old to seek trauma therapy.
So let me ask you about just that decision in and of itself, given the story that you've lived of being put down, maligned, questioning yourself as a result.
Mhm.
How did you get there to realize that you were valuable and had a story to tell? Because so many people will say, no, 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 I've never been good enough to tell my story. Why should that be different now? Am I missing something here?
It's purpose.
Mm.
My purpose is to make things better for children, and information is key to understanding. And I feel that if I put this information out, it will be helpful not only to children in the future, but also to those of us who have survived traumatic a traumatic childhood. And when I look at ACEs, it's typical for a child to have one or two adverse childhood experiences, one or two traumas in their childhood. But when the numbers go beyond that, and mine, I have 5 or 6, depending on how you separate them out, um, it can significantly change your brain wiring.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And I appreciated that you didn't really talk about that till the very last chapter of the book and
Mhm.
bringing the neuroscience then, because your story lays that foundation. You know, Drug Story Theater is my nonprofit, and our kids, majority of them have also experienced ACEs, and they actually wrote a show called
Mhm.
"We're Still Here" that was talking about this. I mean, we go into the neuroscience, and we can certainly, talk about that. But I think the audience may be interested really in the story without giving away the book. Still get the book.
Mhm.
This started for you very young.
Mhm.
At what point did you start realizing something's going on in my family?
There was a point when I had a broken finger. And after several days of telling my mom about it, she finally realized that it was a problem and took me in. And at that point, it was the first time I had heard a doctor notice that perhaps I was not being cared for properly. So, in that way, that concerned me. And then later, I went on a camping trip with a friend. And that was really powerful for me because I noticed that that family was different. It was quite different. There wasn't arguing and violence and put downs and manipulation. It was what I felt at that time was a normal family. And at that point, I was like, it doesn't have to be this way.
Mm-hmm. You were what, about 5 or 6 years old when your finger was broken, or how old were you when that?
I want to say third or fourth grade,
Okay, all right, so a little bit older.
a little older. And then I went on the camping trip when I was in fifth or sixth grade. So as I had more exposure outside of my family, I realized and I decided that my life was going to be different. The problem with that was that I had an all or nothing mindset. When I became a parent, I decided I was never going to let my child get hurt, or I was going to be the perfect parent. And when my child had an accident, I blamed myself. It's all my fault. And went from believing that I was a good parent to believing I was the worst parent. And that threw me into depression and really affected my ability to parent. Until I went to, it was the National Wellness Conference it was held in Stevens Point, Wisconsin, which is very close to where I live. And I was able to do the conference for credit if I helped out with it. And I could attend sessions for free. And so I attended a session on healing your inner child. And the person who hosted that session took us through a guided imagery exercise in which I met myself as a child and was able, in my mind to talk to that person. And I realized for the first time that I was not at fault for what happened to me.
I want to come back to that about meeting your inner child and not being at fault, because I really don't want to be at fault for not giving our sponsors a chance to chat,
Okay.
and we can meet them as well. So what we'll do, we'll take a commercial break. We will listen to the inner world of our sponsors, and we'll be right back with Julianna Burmesch and her amazing book. We'll be right back to hear more about life with less of me. And we are back with the Dr. Joe Show. talking with Julianna Burmesch, Life with Less of Me, a memoir, a powerful memoir. Julianna, is the book out yet? Can people find it? How do they find the book?
You can find the book on any place where you download books. So it'll be on Apple, it's on Amazon, you can get it at BookBub for if you want to support local bookstores. It should be out there, and if it's not at a bookstore, just ask them
To get it.
to
And do you
get
have
it.
a website as well so
I
people can learn
do,
more about you?
juliannaburmesch.com,
And can
and
you
there are links there.
spell the Burmesch for our audience?
Sure, it's Burmesch.
Julianna Burmesch. Before we went off air, we were talking about this conference you'd gone to where you were doing an exercise and meeting your inner child, and you realized, as you said, that you were not at fault. What was that moment like for you?
It was heart-wrenching. I was sobbing at the end of that exercise, and it was like a dam burst in me. All this anger I was feeling towards myself suddenly went away. It was amazing. And then I went to another conference session about negative messaging and how negative messaging can really interfere with how we react to other people. And for me, that was really important because the messages I was sending myself when I was trying to parent were your kids are behaving this way because you're a bad parent. That's what I was telling myself. Rather than my kids are behaving this way because they're tired or they haven't learned a skill or they maybe are distracted. You know, there's many reasons why kids misbehave. But it wasn't because I was a bad parent. Because I wanted to be a good parent. And once I was able to interrupt those thoughts, I was able to be a much better parent.
Yeah. And were those thoughts generated based on your early childhood, and then not just your early childhood, I mean, your childhood, your adolescent years, you had a very angry father, is what you wrote about. And a mom who had to tolerate that, it sounds like.
Yes. She was under tremendous stress. And when I started writing this book, I was very unkind to her in some of the first drafts of my story.
Huh. Interesting.
Um,
What do you make of that?
because my dad had re-traumatized me when I was taking care of him. And that brought back a lot of my feelings of inadequacy and feelings of blame because I had forgiven my mother before that.
True.
But once I had taken him in and I was brought back to the state of my childhood, which involves being triggered. I have PTSD from some of the things that happened as a child. And when you are triggered with a PTSD response, you lose access to your cortex,
Yeah, absolutely.
and activate
Yeah.
your fight flight response.
Absolutely. And I'm just going to, I'm going to ask people in the audience and you, Juliana, think about this one word that we use that has really created, I think, the stigma around mental health, the word disorder.
Mm-hmm.
How are we meant to say that your response to your trauma is a disorder? It's
Right.
survival. It's so let's move away from the disorder part. You have post-traumatic stress,
Mm-hmm.
and your brain is going to be on high alert for saber-toothed tigers everywhere.
Right.
And your dad was a saber-toothed tiger.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I hope you don't mind me saying, but
No.
based on what I've read and your reading,
Mm-hmm.
and yet here's Juliana. I really want my listeners to just appreciate this. Here's Juliana, who has been traumatized by her father and then takes him in his senior years to care for him. What does that say about Juliana? Pretty cool. And yet there you are, getting re-triggered and re-triggered and re-triggered.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. While I was sick.
Yeah.
And when I wrote about that, it made me reflect on my mother and how, she was abused when she was a child, and how my dad's behavior kept us all on eggshells, and her especially because she was the target of most of his physical violence. How her inaccessibility was just her way of escaping from the situation
Mm.
as much as she could.
How old were you when you realized that? 'Cause it's probably not something you realized when you were a kid and saying, where's my mom?
Right. I realized that when I was during the 6 years that I took to write this book.
Yeah.
And 6 years with 6 years of trauma therapy.
And I'm not sure that I caught that in the book, that your mom had been in a family like that as well growing up. But I did catch that you made a conscious decision to not repeat that in your
Right.
family.
Right.
And then you found, or this guy found you leaning up against the wall, not getting that involved in what was happening, and then you meet him.
Uh-huh.
I think our audience deserves to hear that happy part of the story before we get into some of the darker parts. So tell us a bit about John. I hope you don't mind, John.
Oh, he's not here. Um, he was the first male that I ever was able to put my guard down with. He was also,
Which meant you
an it.
trusted him, right?
Right, I
Putting your
trusted
guard
him.
down means trust.
Right, trusted him and was able to be vulnerable with him, to be able to actually talk about how I felt or how he felt. And, he is the kind of person who does not care what other people think, you know? He's his
Oh, yeah.
own person. He wears Minion T-shirts and Groot T-shirts everywhere. He has a sense of humor, and he was exactly the person I needed, not the person that I thought I would marry,
Mm.
because I was always attracted to sullen, people who I never really communicated with, which I am so happy that I happened upon him, and I had some friends who talked me into going out with him, and I was like, "Oh, he's not the kind of guy I'd marry."
Mm.
And they were like, "Well, you don't have to marry him."
Right, right.
But I did, and it was the best decision of my life.
Yeah. It is remarkable, isn't it, when we have someone who sees us as valuable.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the whole I am idea. Respect leads to value, and value leads to trust. And with that trust, you can be who you are
Mm-hmm.
without fear of being devalued and rejected, which it sounds like was a lot of your growing up years.
Mm-hmm.
That fear of being devalued, and then beginning to question ourselves. Well, maybe I'm just really not valuable at all.
Mm-hmm.
Does that sound familiar?
That does sound familiar. Maybe there is something inherently bad about me, with all the religion and the messages I got from my mom, that if I didn't confess my sins, I'd be in purgatory for a long time, And
Yeah.
I was so afraid at that point, talking to a priest in a dark box and telling him what a bad kid I was.
Mm.
No.
Yeah. It is a remarkable request of us to acknowledge that sometimes we do bad things, but that doesn't make us a bad person.
Right.
And that's why I want to be sure that I am not considered a bad person, and give our sponsors their moment to show that they are not either. So with that in mind, we'll take a quick commercial break, and we'll be right back with our guest, Julianna. We'll be right back with the Dr. Joe Show. And we're back with the Dr. Joe Show and our guest, Julianna Burmesch, Life with Less of Me, her memoir. And I think it takes enormous courage to write a memoir like this, Julianna. And I am wondering, was that perhaps an unexpected side effect of going through a house with aces? That you develop courage and resilience and saying, I'm a survivor.
Mm-hmm.
Is there something to that?
Absolutely. I feel like I was put on earth for a purpose, and that purpose is to make a difference. And this is my way of making a difference for children and for other people.
You
I feel that parents right now are under so much stress because of the cost of childcare and the cost of housing, and some parents are just at in the state of trying to keep a roof over their child's head and are very stressed. And I think that we need to pay attention to that.
absolutely. And I wrote a book. My first book was on stress, and started to realize that stress, I think, is really a fear of failure.
Mm-hmm.
We get stressed out when we think that we're not going to do well and that we will be devalued. And one of the sort of solutions in the book is the best way to manage your stress is to help decrease somebody else's,
Mm-hmm.
because then you become a benefactor, and benefactors are highly prized and valued in our society. I want to get back, because we were talking about this a bit off air. In the first piece of the show, we talked about you being a principal and getting laid off. And was there part of you that sort of just accepted it because you grew up as a kid who didn't have any value? So it just sort of makes sense, right? I'm going to get laid off. I'm going to get fired. I mean, I guess I wasn't doing my job and somebody caught me.
Right. I felt like she finally sees me for who I am, that I wasn't worthy, and she finally realized that, and that's why she let me go. That had nothing to do with why she let me
No,
go.
of course not.
Um,
But that's the rationale, right?
right.
That's the way we defend against that feeling of devaluation, anger, despair. Ah, must have been my fault. The greatest, the most difficult feeling for a human being to tolerate is being powerless. So we make things up to defend against being powerless. I must have done something. That's what guilt is. It's a way of trying to defend against being powerless. Was that some of your experience?
Absolutely. And the fear, because I knew as an administrator that if I shared with a legal representative that I had been sick with necrotizing fasciitis. It took me a year to learn to walk. I had multiple surgeries following that, and then I had cancer, and she non-renewed my contract.
She meaning the principal. I mean the superintendent.
Superintendent.
So
She non-renewed my contract 3 months after I'd finished chemotherapy. I knew that I could fight it. Plus, my record as an early childhood principal and all the work I had done with the 4-year-old kindergarten program. But in order to do that, I had to admit that I was depressed. And I couldn't do that.
why not? Why couldn't you do that?
I had spent my life trying to cover up my mental health issues. And at the state I was in, I was failing at it. And I didn't want to share that with another person, especially that I didn't know,
That vulnerability. And yet, that has been the block and the barrier to so many people getting help. And that's why I don't like that word disorder, because that's the stigmatization. It's saying you're not good enough, you're broken.
Right.
And that's why we keep these secrets.
And I felt I was broken. But I wasn't. It was out of my control.
Yeah. There's this idea, theory of mind. I'm sure you've heard of theory of mind. The idea we can't see someone's mind, so we have to theorize and guess what they think or feel. It's the root of empathy, but especially what they think about us. That's what the IC domain is in the IM approach. And it's because secrets aren't secrets because of what we've done. Secrets are secrets because we worry, how will someone judge me if they know my secret? And yet here you are, Julianna, sharing these secrets for the good of so many. I mean, you talk about, helping kids in their early childhood and being sure that they're given the supports they need. But what you're demonstrating is, those supports aren't just for children.
Right, exactly.
Right? So how do we do that? And what do you think? I mean, let's talk a little bit about some of the neuroscience and the biology. ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, are a direct result of massive cortisol response. So how do you think that your massive cortisol response may have impacted the subsequent medical conditions that you were experiencing?
One of the stories in my book, I'm in an elevator accident. And at that point, it didn't seem to bother me very much. I took a few months off of using elevators. But I was fine. I was fine until I was a mother feeling stressed. We took our kids on an excursion to see a submarine in Manitowoc, Wisconsin. And I went down there and the it was the smell of the grease that triggered the memory of the elevator accident. And I became severely claustrophobic after that. That was my first panic attack. I went from 0 to 10, and it interfered with my life. There are many things that trigger me, and some of them I don't understand where they come from. For example, if someone touches me without me knowing they're going to touch me, like on my back, even my husband, or if he touches me on my head, I feel it in my body, like this leveling up of my anxiety. I don't know where that comes from. I mean, certainly I was physically abused once by my dad, and my mom stopped that in the only way she knew how. But he still hit her all the time. And I don't know if I'm answering your question, but yeah, my infections that I had as a child, I think, had a physical effect on me, so that when I get an infection as an adult, it tends to be pretty bad. I mean, I've gotten sepsis from a bladder infection. If I had a problem with a tooth and it ended up like going, infections are something that I deal with a lot. All of that physical stuff, there's an easy way to draw a line from like the elevator to the claustrophobia. There's an easy way to draw a line between my childhood infections and my infections as an adult. But there are a lot of triggers beyond that, psychological triggers. If I feel that someone is manipulating me or undermining me, I'm triggered because I lived with so much manipulation as a child. And when that happens, I go from using my cortex to this fight-flight response and respond sometimes inappropriately. I'm working on that.
Well, it's being able to recognize it is the first step in that. It's much more important to be reflective than reflexive, and to wonder than to worry. But it
Right.
makes sense. I mean, it's part of our biological survival response. And that's what we see a lot with kids who've had these adverse childhood experiences, is they're on this different level of alert, that the world is a potentially dangerous place. And yet they all have the capacity to recognize that. And I am absolutely convinced that the way they begin to recognize it is recognizing that somebody else sees them as valuable.
Right.
That you are okay. That it doesn't dismiss what happened to you.
Nope.
Not at all. But it's saying those triggers make sense, right? The triggers are activating a memory. You can't have a trigger unless there's something for it to trigger, which is a memory. And memories live in our limbic system. Our limbic system is that ancient part of our brain responsible for impulses, for emotions, for memories, for survival. That's what gets triggered. But then, as you talk about the cortex, our neocortex, our prefrontal cortex, new cortex brain, and we have evolved this new brain where we can step back and look again at what just happened. And one of the tricks that I have my folks do is I said, just when you feel these things, just put your hand on your forehead, right? Because right behind there is your prefrontal cortex. How many times have you done something limbically, impulsively,
Mhm.
and slapped your forehead as if trying to jumpstart your prefrontal cortex? And I want to be sure that I keep both my limbic system and prefrontal cortex intact by remembering that I have to take a commercial break to give our sponsors an opportunity to talk about what they can offer to increase the value of our listeners. We'll be right back with the Dr. Joe Show. We'll be right back. And we are back with the Dr. Joe Show. And our guest tonight, Julianna Burmesch, Life with Less of Me, her memoir about the adverse childhood experiences that she had, but the resilience that she shows now. And when we're off air, there was something that you wanted to bring up in particular, Julianna. You want to tell our audience about it? We'll get right to it. What did you want to talk about?
I want to talk about unconditional positive regard and how when I saw myself in that meditation as a child, I realized that I was not to blame for what happened to me. And all the messages that I had gotten that you're bad because of this or you're, kind of melted away. And that helped me to develop my philosophy of working with children. As a principal, every single staff member that was hired when I was principal of the early childhood program, and every year I told my staff that it is important to maintain the dignity of every child in every interaction. And yet I understand that there are times when you may not be your best self, and that's okay. But I want you to ask for help. In those, if you feel like for whatever reason a child needs to be managed by someone else, I will always find either myself or somebody else. And I had some staff members who were masters at dealing with children, that it was okay to say, I can't deal with it. When I got sick with my flesh-eating disease and came out of my coma, I was in a very bad state of mind. But I had a nurse who came up to me at the end of a very difficult day, and he sat by me and said pretty much the same thing, only like, if you need help, if you need to talk with somebody, if you need to have better pain management, all you have to do is talk to us. Let us know. And every single interaction that I had at that hospital, the nurses treated me with unconditional positive regard.
Yeah.
Some of the things aren't even in my book in regard to some of the difficult things that I had to go through. But the nurses were so gracious and helped me, never were frustrated with me, no matter how much I whined about getting my my wound vac changed. When I left that hospital, I was as balanced as I had ever been.
Hmm.
I felt like I could really look at people and listen to them. And it was so healing for me to be
Yeah,
treated like that.
that's right. That's right.
It reinforced my belief that we need to treat others, especially children, with unconditional positive regard. And I know that I'm not perfect with this because there are times when I'm triggered where I may say something that if I was using my prefrontal cortex,
Right. Right.
I would probably not say.
Right.
And I'm working on it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's okay, right?
It's absolutely okay. And a, a a few things that you remind me of. The first thing is being able to ask for help.
Mhm.
So one of the things that I teach all of my residents, my students, my staff is never worry alone.
Mhm.
Always find someone to worry with. It's fine. Never worry alone. You don't need to be a hero about this. The second rule is the therapist must survive.
Mhm.
Right? If you find yourself worrying, it means you haven't followed the first rule. Never worry alone. And this unconditional positive regard, I absolutely, it's the I am. It's by saying,
Mhm.
I just want to know who you are and why you do what you do. And what you're also talking about is what I also say to my students. It's not the Prozac. It's
Mhm.
you. You are the medicine. And that's what those nurses were doing.
Mhm.
They are the medicine because they remind you of your value. And that creates oxytocin, not Oxycontin,
Right.
oxytocin, which is the neurohormone of trust
Mhm.
and healing and happiness. Now, you also speak in the book about a couple of doctors who did not have that approach and were a little bit more aggressive. Um,
Mhm.
and sadly, that's also part of our world,
Mhm.
is that there are people like that who the only way that they can feel valuable is to make somebody else feel less valuable.
Mhm.
And I wonder about them. What's going on with their I am? What happened in
Right.
their home or social domain that's the best they
Mhm.
can do? So, speaking of the I am, let's just go to the two questions. As the audience knows, and they've heard it so many times, hundreds of times now, the I am is basically saying we're all doing the best we can. This is my current maximum potential, responding to an influence by four domains. Your home domain, we're speaking a lot about that tonight. The social domain, we're speaking about that too, in the hospital, at the school, just walking down the road. Those two domains are outside. Two internal domains, the biological domain of your brain and body, hungry, tired, digesting lunch, in your case, cancer, necrotizing fasciitis. How does my biological domain respond? And then the I see. How do I see myself? How do I think other people see me? And because these domains interact, a small change in any domain can have a big effect. We don't need to change everything. So, Juliana, based on what we're talking about tonight, what small change can you recommend to our listeners?
I would recommend that they listen to the messages they're sending themselves when they're feeling uncomfortable or feeling out of control. Is is the message true? And
Mm.
if it's not, can you find a message that is more accurate? Like when I was a parent saying I was um, a bad parent, because that just activated my limbic system and I went into fight and flight and got my heel stuck in my floor because I stamped my foot so hard. um,
That's in the book, folks. Worth
it's
reading.
in the book. Yeah. And change those messages to something that is true. Kids behave badly,
Yeah.
and we need to figure out a solution. Maybe they need to learn a skill. Maybe they need a chart. to say, okay, is my backpack at the door? Are my shoes at the door? You know, have them put the stickers on. Kids love stickers, you know. um, then by doing that, you take the response out of that emotional center of your brain and put it into your prefrontal cortex, and you start solving the problem rather than reacting to the problem.
So that's a great small change. Mhm. How have you done that? Maybe even just today.
Well, today I was like, I am nervous about this podcast because I'm with someone who has written 4 or 5 books and is really an expert in the field that I'm somewhat talking about, and I was worried about that, and I had to think, why am I feeling anxious?
Mm.
You know, and I went back to your 4 Rs, right?
Right,
And I did
right,
some of those breathing exercises
right.
and said to myself, this is such an opportunity because he is going to help clarify my thinking as well. And together we'll work in tandem and it'll be great. So I feel we did that.
I do too. I do too. And I really enjoy this. Now, the second truth of the I am, I think, is even more powerful than the first. Everybody's got one. Everyone is interested through their IC domain, what you think about them, which has an effect in their biological domain, because it feels different when you feel respected or disrespected.
Mm-hmm.
And you're part of someone's home or social domain. So the second truth of the I am, you control no one, but you influence everyone. And you get to choose the kind of influence you want to be. Julianna Burmesch, author, teacher, educator, parent, writer, survivor. What kind of influence do you want to be?
I want to influence people in giving themselves a break. Very similar to what you're talking about in I am. If I am trying to keep a roof over my head and trying to feed my kids, that is where I'm at right now, and to be okay with where you are. Not saying that you don't think you can't go further, but saying that, okay, this is where I'm at. And am I keeping a roof over my head? Yes. Or do I need help? Possibly. Reach out and get that help. That was something that was so hard for me because in order to get help, I had to show who I was.
Yeah. Yeah. You
And
have
I
to be
spent my
vulnerable.
whole life hiding that.
Yeah. And now you've written this book, Life with Less of Me, a memoir. Julianna Burmesch. How do they get the book again?
Should be out there on Amazon, on Book Hub or bookshop.com, on everywhere you buy books.
And your website.
And my website. Yep.
Okay. Thank you so much for being a guest tonight on the Dr. Joe Show and inspiring us and reminding us that, ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, have an influence, but they don't need to define you. So, thanks for being with us tonight. Appreciate it. Good night, folks. We'll see you next week.